Have you ever stopped to think why life often feels like a constant cycle of pain and disappointment? Arthur Schopenhauer believed this wasn't just coincidence, it was the natural state of existence. According to him, life is suffering, and then it ends. But what if he was telling the truth? What if the happiness you're chasing is just a mirage, something that was never real to begin with? You can choose to look away, but the reality is this. Your current beliefs about life might be silently working against you. If you're willing to confront this possibility, then stay with me for the next few minutes. Picture a solitary man walking through town with his loyal poodle at his side, eyes heavy with sorrow and thought. That man was Arthur Schopenhauer, one of philosophy's most provocative and compelling voices. To Schopenhauer, the world wasn't a place of harmony or meaning. It was a theater of suffering. From the moment of birth, we are tossed into a battle for survival that we never asked to join. Watching a bird feast on a live worm, he saw more than nature at work. He saw tragedy. The worm's agony, torn apart while still alive, struck him as far more powerful than the fleeting satisfaction the bird felt after its meal. This observation only strengthened his conviction that suffering plays a much larger role in life than joy or comfort ever could. After years of intense thought, Schopenhauer reached a bold conclusion. Maybe it would be better if life never existed at all, if the planet were as empty and lifeless as the moon. He knew how grim this sounded, but he didn't care for sugarcoating. For him, philosophy wasn't about comforting lies. It was about confronting harsh truths without flinching. In his view, existence is filled with a relentless sense of lack, where happiness comes in brief flashes and quickly disappears beneath the weight of constant pain, setbacks, and grief. But where does all this suffering begin? Schopenhauer traced it back to an unseen force, an unquenchable drive he called the will to live. This will is what pushes us to want, to chase, to crave endlessly. But no matter how much we obtain, we're never truly fulfilled. We're doomed to want more. That's why many label his philosophy as gloomy or hopeless. But this outlook wasn't meant to depress. It came from a place of honesty, a willingness to look at life without illusion. Though he lived much of his life alone and often in conflict with others, Schopenhauer's ideas have left a lasting impact. He shaped the thinking of great minds like Nietzsche and Freud, and his works continue to speak to readers even today. Maybe the power of his philosophy lies precisely in this. It doesn't turn away from the ugly parts of life. It encourages us to confront them, to understand them, instead of pretending they aren't there. In this video, we'll journey into the mind of Arthur Schopenhauer, exploring his life, his thoughts, and why he believed existence itself is so unforgiving. Arthur Schopenhauer was born in 1788 in the city of Danzig, what we now call Gdansk in present-day Poland. He was raised in a well-off merchant family. After losing his father early in life, he endured a strained relationship with his mother, Johanna, a woman known for being ambitious and concerned with social standing. Johanna had dreams of seeing her son enter the world of commerce, but Arthur's nature was very different. He was a reflective and independent thinker who didn't conform to the conventional path she had envisioned for him. This ongoing conflict with his mother, along with the cultural atmosphere surrounding him, helped shape the pessimistic outlook that would later define his philosophy, a perspective that, while difficult to accept, still prompts us to examine the meaning of life more closely. Prepare to dive into the mind of one of history's most daring and thought-provoking philosophers. Schopenhauer had a restless intellectual curiosity. He was especially intrigued by Eastern thought, drawn to Buddhist and Hindu teachings long before they gained popularity in the West. He found deep meaning in ancient texts such as the Upanishads and the Bhagavad Gita, which stood in stark contrast to the mostly Eurocentric philosophical focus of his contemporaries. At the same time, his ideas were influenced by the works of classical thinkers like Plato, Aristotle, and Spinoza. His academic years at the universities of Göttingen and Berlin were marked by deep engagement with Immanuel Kant's philosophy, which had a major impact on his theoretical framework. During this period of intellectual growth, Schopenhauer produced his magnum opus, The World as Will and Representation, published in 1818. This book laid out the core structure of his philosophical vision. At the heart of it was a radical concept. Behind everything we perceive lies a blind, irrational force, what he called the will. This will, according to him, fuels the behavior of every living creature, compelling them to chase after their wants and needs in an endless cycle of striving, one that ultimately leads to suffering. Although his ideas were original and deeply insightful, they were largely ignored during his lifetime. His grim interpretation of existence didn't align with the more optimistic ideologies that were fashionable at the time, and so he remained an outsider in the philosophical world for much of his life. Yet with time, his influence grew. Notable figures like Nietzsche, Wagner, Freud, Tolstoy, and even Einstein found inspiration in his thinking, helping to cement his lasting impact on intellectual history. In addition to his primary philosophical treatise, Schopenhauer authored a variety of essays and aphorisms that remain influential. His collection Parerga and Paralipomena makes his thoughts accessible to a broader audience, with well-known sections such as Studies on Pessimism and the Wisdom of Life. His book, The Art of Being Right, serves almost like a handbook for mastering argumentation. Other works like On the Fourfold Root of the Principle of Sufficient Reason, On the Freedom of the Will, and The Foundation of Morality explore foundational issues in metaphysics and ethics. Schopenhauer's legacy endures because his questions cut to the very core of existence. What animates the world around us? What gives a rock its solidity? Why does a star shine? Why do humans chase their goals with such relentless energy? His answer was the will to live, a primal, unconscious force embedded in everything that exists, from matter to mind, shaping all forms of life and desire. To Arthur Schopenhauer, the will wasn't merely a philosophical abstraction. It was a fundamental, all-encompassing force that drives everything in existence. Whether it's the firmness of a rock or the human instinct to survive and reproduce, all things are moved by this primal energy. But unlike our conscious thoughts or logical decisions, this will operates independently, outside the domain of reason and beyond our control. It shapes our simplest urges as well as our more sophisticated ambitions, like striving for recognition, pursuing power, or clinging to life itself. Yet it also binds us to an endless loop of craving and disappointment, reinforcing Schopenhauer's bleak view that suffering is inescapably woven into the fabric of life. Through his philosophy, Schopenhauer invites us to reconsider our understanding of life, not to romanticize it, but to see the uncomfortable truths that often go unnoticed beneath the surface of everyday experience. Have you ever stopped to ask what truly drives your actions? Beneath your conscious awareness, there's a hidden force steering your behavior, one that doesn't ask for your consent. Schopenhauer named this the will to live. It's the instinctual force that often overrides logic and causes us to act impulsively or irrationally. Take reproduction, for instance. While people may give rational reasons for wanting children, the fundamental drive goes much deeper. It's instinctual, almost automatic. Animals don't ponder the meaning of reproduction. They simply follow the biological impulse to propagate the species. To Schopenhauer, this universal compulsion, evident in both animals and humans, was proof that we're not as free as we think. He believed the will to live is what traps us in a world of constant striving, where satisfaction is fleeting and suffering is the rule, not the exception. One of his most revolutionary claims was that the will and the intellect are entirely distinct. Whereas many earlier thinkers treated the will as subordinate to the intellect, Schopenhauer argued the opposite. The will acts independently of reason. This separation was central to his philosophy, breaking away from older systems that merged the two. Now pause and consider, what is it that we truly experience when we observe the world? Are we seeing reality in its pure form, or just a version filtered through our senses and minds? For Schopenhauer, we don't perceive the world as it actually is. Instead, we encounter a version constructed by our mental faculties. Everything we experience is shaped, filtered by our senses, our intellect, and our personal perspective. Each individual interprets reality through their own unique lens. The deeper true nature of things, what he called the noumenal world, is, in his view, forever beyond our grasp. What we interact with is the phenomenal world, a mental representation shaped by the way we process experience. It's like trying to understand the inner workings of a machine by only looking at its display. You interact with the interface but have no direct access to the inner code or the one who wrote it. In this way, Schopenhauer saw the will to live as the unseen force behind even our perception of reality. Our wants and needs shape how we see the world, distorting it through desire. In essence, our cravings act as lenses, constantly altering our experience and blinding us to the true nature of things. This will to live, although unseen, permeates every aspect of existence. It acts like the hidden structure that holds the universe together, not something we can observe directly, but something we constantly feel through its consequences. And to be honest, those consequences are rarely pleasant. Schopenhauer viewed the world as so saturated with misery and pain that he argued it might be better if life never existed at all. Like the barren stillness of the moon, he imagined a reality without the chaos and turmoil of living. In his eyes, life was an endless loop of dissatisfaction and pain. Our wants never truly rest, and even when we fulfill one, another quickly takes its place, bringing new struggles along with it. He believed that pain always outweighs pleasure, not just for individuals, but for life as a whole. In his collection, Studies on Pessimism, he lays out a stark vision of existence, portraying humanity as caught in a constant war with irrational forces, both within and without, battling endlessly against discomfort, loss, and hardship. In Schopenhauer's view, life is a battleground and no one escapes unscathed. The will drives us, ensuring we are never content for long. It keeps us running like hamsters on a wheel. Every time we satisfy a craving, another emerges. We might finally move into our dream home, only to crave a better car, a fancier kitchen, or a more luxurious vacation. And just as quickly, we're dreaming of replacing it all again. This relentless pattern of craving and disillusionment wears us down. Satisfaction is nothing more than a fleeting pause between new desires. According to Schopenhauer, pleasure isn't a true positive experience. It's simply a brief break from pain, which he believed was the dominant, ever-present reality of life. That might sound severe, but when we reflect on how deeply pain affects us compared to how briefly pleasure lingers, it starts to feel true. Consider how devastating it is to lose someone you love. That sorrow can stay with us for years. Now compare that to the short-lived joy of getting something you wanted. The difference in emotional weight is enormous. It's the same with romantic relationships. They often begin with intense excitement, but soon fears creep in. Fear of loss, fear of change. Then routine sets in, boredom follows, and when it all falls apart, the pain can feel unbearable. Yet we continue chasing love, driven by that same will, fooled into thinking the next time will be different. This force, the will that drives us, is also the greatest deception. It convinces us that happiness is just around the corner, that the next goal reached will finally bring lasting peace. It downplays the suffering of life and overstates the rewards. But as Schopenhauer bluntly reminded us, life is full of unavoidable hardships, illness, grief, betrayal, and the relentless march of time that eventually brings us to aging and death. Schopenhauer once compared youth to the opening act of a play. In our younger years, everything feels vibrant, full of hope and opportunity. Yet as we grow older and look back, that early optimism often seems misguided. Life rarely delivers on the bright promises it once seemed to hold. He pointed out that if two friends who knew each other as children were to meet again in old age, their dominant emotion would likely be disappointment, not because of each other, but because they'd recall a time when the world felt full of potential and how little of it was actually realized. But Schopenhauer didn't just dwell on the bleakness of life. He also explored ways to lessen its weight. One such path was asceticism, the rejection of physical and material pleasures as a way to break free from the grip of desire. Still, he recognized that such extreme renunciation wasn't practical for everyone. So instead, he proposed a more attainable goal: to live in a manner that reduces suffering. This meant seeking out modest and manageable joys, those that don't demand high cost or emotional turmoil. He placed particular value on intellectual pleasures, which are inexpensive, fulfilling, and accessible even into old age. Another of Schopenhauer's practical recommendations was to let go of the need for others' approval. Chasing validation from people often leads us to overextend ourselves, chasing shallow rewards that offer little real satisfaction. Rather than living to impress, he believed we should aim for what brings genuine peace and well-being, freeing ourselves from the endless loop of unfulfilled cravings. In his view, living well was a skill, an art that called for thoughtfulness and self-awareness. He pointedly observed that many of our troubles begin with a single, often unconscious question: what will people think? That question, he believed, was at the root of much of our stress and unhappiness. He also emphasized how the constant worry about being judged by others inflates the ego, making us fragile and overly reactive to life's disappointments. Above all, Schopenhauer considered health the most valuable possession. To him, it was worth far more than fame or wealth. He questioned the point of having riches if poor health renders you unable to enjoy them. A modest person in good physical and mental condition, he believed, has a far better shot at happiness than a sickly millionaire. That raises an important question. Are our daily choices genuinely aimed at reducing our suffering, or are they just adding to it? Yet even with all this advice, Schopenhauer didn't sugarcoat reality. Life, in his eyes, remained a harsh ride, a chaotic roller coaster where suffering drowns out fleeting joys. With his trademark dark humor, he summed it up brutally. Today is bad, tomorrow will be worse, and so it goes until the worst day of all. Schopenhauer's worldview may seem severe, but in a strange way, it challenges us to face life with honesty and courage. If you've stayed with me until now, I want to acknowledge something important. You're not like most people. You're someone willing to grapple with the hard truths, to explore questions many would rather ignore. That alone sets you apart. It feels as though we've been sitting together by a quiet fire under the stars, having one of those rare, meaningful conversations, while the noise of the world fades into the background. I imagine you now, maybe feeling a bit unsettled, maybe intrigued, letting all of this sink in. And it brings to mind something Schopenhauer once said: true wisdom isn't about escaping pain, but about understanding it. Perhaps that's the real path we're on, the quest to grasp what drives us, to understand what it means to be human. And if even for a moment during this video you felt seen, felt understood, then this time we've shared has already served its purpose. So thank you. Thank you for your presence, for your sincerity, for being someone who's willing to question and reflect, even when it's uncomfortable. That takes real strength. We're all fellow travelers on this uncertain road called life. And though the journey isn't easy, it's moments like this, of clarity, of connection, that make it meaningful. Until next time, my friend, keep seeking, keep wondering, and don't be afraid to step into the unknown. Oh, and before you leave, I've chosen 3 videos just for you. They're filled with thought-provoking ideas and insights that I believe will speak to you deeply. Click one and continue your journey of understanding with more powerful content from this channel.